Everyone desires progress. Everyone craves momentum. Everyone says they want results. But relatively few are willing to do the one thing that assures all of it: take continuous action. Not dramatic activity. Not once a year spurts of productivity. Not huge gestures that wow people for a day. Consistent action, the little, steady, repeated movement that may not receive plaudits in the beginning, but becomes something great over time. Because real growth doesn't come from intensity, it comes from rhythm. From turning up even when you're not motivated. From doing the work when it's uninteresting. From honoring the pledge when the emotion is gone. Most people never master this, not because they don't care, not because they're lazy, but because they haven't yet made peace with the notion that greatness exists inside the banal. The world is loud, full of excitement, noise, and new strategies. People love to talk about the next big thing, the breakthrough method, the shortcut, the overnight transformation. But the truth has never changed. Success still belongs to the consistent. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, the ones that keep going. The ones that keep in motion when everyone else is waiting to feel inspired. The ones that stack tiny wins day after day, until those wins become into identity. You don't need additional talent. You don't need more luck. You don't need a better time of year. You need to decide. Decide that motion counts more than mood. That follow-through counts more than feeling good. That discipline will serve you longer than inspiration ever could. Because motivation diminishes, runs out. Emotion is unpredictable. But consistency, that's a decision. That's power. That's ownership. Most individuals connect inconsistency with lack of discipline, but it's deeper than that. It's usually a mentality problem, a misunderstanding of how growth actually works. People demand instantaneous feedback, speedy outcomes, instant rewards. And when it doesn't happen, they assume something's amiss. They assume they failed. They assume they're not cut out for it. But nothing's wrong. It's only that results take time, and time only compensates people who are still moving. Think about anything lasting. A relationship, a business, a skill, a body, a reputation. None of it is built in a weekend. All of it is built by repetition, through showing up, through practice, through failing and trying again, through doing the work when you don't feel like it, through choosing movement over mood again and again and again. It's not that successful individuals are superhuman. It's because they've conditioned themselves not to disappear when things grow repetitious. They've educated themselves to value progress even when it's not obvious. They've stopped depending on emotion and begun depending on pattern. And pattern, that's where the power is, not in hype, in habit, not in feeling, in execution. This is the great divider, not who begins, but who stays, not who talks about it, but who lives it. Not who shows up now and then when it's easy, but who establishes the lifestyle where consistency becomes usual, then identity, then a baseline they refuse to go below. That's who wins. That's who grows. That's who builds something that lasts. Consistent action doesn't begin with discipline. It begins with a decision. Not a half-hearted wish. A real decision. One made in a calm moment, apart from the noise. A decision where you say, I'm done negotiating with myself. Because that's what breaks most people, not the work, but the daily mental back and forth about whether to come up. And every time you reopen that discussion, you lose energy, you lose focus. You let emotions sit where your values should lead. You won't be consistent if you keep voting on the same promise every morning. The decision has to be taken beforehand. Your default must be show up. Not show up if I feel well. Not show up if it's simple. Just show up. That involves pulling feelings off the throne and putting principles in their place. That implies surrendering short-term relaxation for long-term strength. That means understanding who you are before the day tries to tell you otherwise. This is where identification begins to meet action. Most people think action follows belief, but it also flows the other way. The more you act in line with your values, but the more those acts shape who you are. Every time you honor your commitment to yourself, You cast a vote for the kind of person you're becoming, and those votes mount up, not in one day, not in one week, but over time. They build self-trust, they form identity. They create a norm that becomes second nature. But consistency demands structure. You can't just rely on willpower. Willpower is a feeble fuel. It's like lighting a match each morning and praying the flame lasts. What you need is rhythm, routine, systems. Something that holds you up when your motivation doesn't. And it doesn't have to be complex. It just has to be consistent. A simple morning habit. A repeatable work setting. A set time to move your body each day. A plan to cook meals, to clean your environment, to reconnect with your goals. Even when yesterday didn't go your way. These things aren't spectacular, but they're strong because they build anchors. And anchors keep you from wandering. The fundamental value of constant activity isn't only results, it's momentum. Momentum matters more. Because results are delayed. Results can be deceiving. Results can be influenced. But momentum is real. It's honest. It's instant. It's yours. It's the silent force that accumulates when you follow through. When you do what you stated you'd do, even when no one is watching, even when it doesn't appear to matter yet, even when the payoff hasn't arrived. Momentum is emotional. It's internal. It's a shift you feel as habits begin to stack, when your identity starts to lock in, when your decisions stop feeling forced and start feeling normal. Most people never reach that transition because they quit too early. They halt at the first obstacle. They disappear when it gets uninteresting. They break the streak. And instead of coming back, they walk away. But the power isn't in the streak. It's in the return. It's about deciding to turn up after you've missed. It's in that one moment when you feel like quitting, and you take a modest step forward regardless. That's consistency, not perfection. Not doing it every day without fail, but being someone who always comes back, someone who resets rapidly, someone who doesn't let a tough hour ruin the whole day. You train this by lowering the barrier to entrance. Make it easier to begin. Have your clothes ready, your book open, your space clean. Make the first move so little that motivation isn't required. Because once you're in motion, momentum takes control, and momentum defeats indecision every time. Movement increases confidence. Confidence builds clarity, and clarity keeps you going. So don't wait for the perfect strategy. Don't get stuck optimizing every detail. Just start. Build the habit of beginning, even on the toughest days, especially on the rough days. Because every challenging day you show up makes the next one easier. It makes your identity stronger. It makes your standard more solid. That's what you're building, not just outcomes, but a standard. One that doesn't shatter when life knocks you off track. This is how consistency creates freedom. It's not restriction. It's release. You stop overthinking. You cease doubting every step. You know your way. You know your pace. And you trust the process because you trust yourself. That trust is earned. Earned every time you act from principle, not preference. Every time you honor the rhythm, not the mood. Every time you move forward. Not because you're inspired, but because you're building. Consistency is often misconstrued because results occur so slowly, so silently, so uneventfully that most people never realize they're developing something significant. It's only after they quit that they appreciate what they lost. Only after they break the rhythm do they look back and recognize how much progress they were actually making. And that's the real test. Can you keep going when it doesn't feel like it's working? Can you maintain showing up without rapid feedback? Can you live in the tension between faith and discipline long enough to enable the compound effect take hold? The cumulative effect isn't just about money. It's not merely about interest rates or financial investments. It applies to everything: relationships, talents, habits, health, reputation, emotional control, your presence, your integrity. Everything meaningful is molded by time, effort, and invisible progress that accumulates, slowly, then all at once. Those who realize this stop rushing. They cease quitting. They cease expecting enormous outcomes from little spurts of effort. They commit to the long game. This isn't about crushing yourself into exhaustion. It's about acknowledging the truth that you are always planting seeds, whether you know it or not. And what you water grows. Your words, your ideas, your routines, your energies, they're all constructing something. The only way to make it something worthwhile is to cultivate it with care, repetition, and patience. But consistency breaks down when your goals don't fit your identity, when your vision thrills you, but your habits don't support it, when your to-do list is full, but your underlying principles are unclear, when you haven't yet become someone who acts from alignment, not emotion. Because when you're aligned, you move with conviction. When you're not, you move with perplexity. And misunderstanding leads to inconsistency. So what can you do? You create your habits mirror your future. You ask, what would the best version of me do today? You align the small steps with the big vision. You stop chasing enormous action and start seeking consistent alignment. Because if your modest steps are focused towards the appropriate goal, you'll get there. If they're not, no matter how fast you move, you're still headed in the wrong way. That's why reflection matters. You can't just keep working. You have to halt and think. You have to check in. You have to ask whether your calendar reflects your priorities, whether your habits represent your ideals, and whether your mood is shaping your decisions, or the other way around. Most individuals are too busy doing to recognize they're doing the wrong things. Consistency without direction is a trap, a treadmill with no exit. So you slow down, you reassess. You don't need to revamp everything. You simply need to connect the dots to make sure the lifestyle you're living represents the life you're attempting to construct. Because once it does, consistency becomes easy. Not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer in conflict with yourself. You're no longer dragging yourself through a plan that doesn't seem right. You're in flow. And flow is born from alignment, not effort. But alignment still demands effort. You still have to show up. You still have to push past resistance. You still have to act, even when you don't feel like it. The difference is, now the behavior feels honest. It feels grounded. It feels like you're doing what you said you would. Not because someone else told you to, but because you told yourself the truth. And you stopped lying to yourself for the sake of comfort. That honesty, that willingness to do the hard thing when it resonates with who you want to be. That's where consistency thrives. It doesn't need hype. It doesn't need a crowd. It only needs integrity, quiet, internal, repetitive integrity. The kind that doesn't shatter when you're sleepy. The kind that doesn't fold while no one's watching. The kind that shows up over and over until the habits become identity. So the question is not, can I be consistent? The question is, can I construct a life that makes consistency easier? Can I simplify? Can I align? Can I clarify what matters most and remove what distracts? Can I establish habits that help me instead of stress me? Can I build an environment where aligned conduct is the default, not constant resistance? That's the secret most people overlook. Consistency isn't only about willpower, it's about surroundings, structure, rhythm, habit, identity. It's about decreasing friction and improving flow. It's about constructing a life where doing the right thing becomes the easy thing. Not because it is easy, but because you've rehearsed it so many times, it seems like home. Consistency is tested most in silence. Not in the big moments, not in the breakthroughs, not while the world is watching, but in the quiet. In the seasons when nothing seems to be moving. When progress feels invisible. When it looks like your work isn't making a difference. That's where most individuals fall off, not because they lack competence, but because they lack certainty. Because they've confused development with proof. And when the proof fades, so does their belief. But belief is never developed in outcomes. It's built in follow-through. It's built in staying with something long enough to see what it becomes. Because consistency, at its foundation, is an act of trust. You're planting with no harvest in sight. You're writing with no guarantee anyone will read it. You're training, researching, constructing, serving without applause. That's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it rare. Because remaining consistent when it's simple doesn't mold you. Staying constant when it's silent does. When your schedule is busy yet your spirit is drained. When you're crossing off tasks but questioning their worth. When no one's cheering. When you're the only one clapping. When the road feels interminable and you've forgotten what the finish line even looks like. That's when identity is established. This is where you learn to anchor your actions in who you are, not in what you get. You stop behaving to pursue a result and start acting because this is who you've become. A builder, a leader, a person who keeps their word, even when the prize is delayed. And that delay, the space between the input and the outcome, is where power is found. Because it's where most people quit. You train yourself not to panic during the pause. You train yourself not to confuse silence for failure. You prepare yourself to be solid without frequent reassurance. And once you do, you become unstoppable. Because now your acts aren't reactive. They're grounded, purposeful. You don't move merely because something feels urgent. You move because it's time, because you choose to, because you trust your principles more than your feelings. Trusting the process is challenging when you're wired for feedback, when you've been conditioned to expect likes, comments, praise, purchases, speedy results. But the most substantial progress is always slow, always quiet, always created beneath the surface before it's visible above it. That's not the design. Because if it came easily, everyone would have it. And if it came rapidly, no one would be ready to hold it. You don't become the kind of guy who wins frequently by winning rarely. You become that person by knowing how to move while nothing around you is moving. By doing the work with no recognition. By sticking to the strategy before the payday arrives. You keep the pace. You keep the rhythm. You show up, not to be seen, but because showing up is what you do today. This builds resilience, not the loud, theatrical sort, the steady kind, the kind that doesn't break under strain, the sort that bends without snapping, the kind that knows exactly what to do when life turns unpredictable, because it's trained to respond, not react, to act from values, from principles, from clarity. And that insight doesn't come from one fantastic day. It derives from hundreds of typical ones, hundreds of reps, hundreds of peaceful moments where you simply performed what you said you would. Not because you felt like it, but because you committed to it, and your actions indicate it. The evidence accumulates up, and it establishes a reputation, not with others, but with oneself. You know you're reliable, and that self-respect is the genuine prize. The individual who honors their word becomes powerful in any space. You don't need to convince anyone. Your honesty speaks for itself. You talk from experience, and you act from identity. You don't need to feign confidence. You've earned it. Not via praise, but through consistency. That's the kind of accomplishment no one can take away from you, because it wasn't handed to you. It's something you built. The folks who create remarkable things aren't the ones who got everything right the first time. They're the ones who kept showing up after things went bad. That's the true key. The ability to maintain gaining momentum after disruption. It's one of the most overlooked characteristics of consistency. You'll slip up. You'll miss days. You'll lose your rhythm. But the people who fail are not those who stumble. They're the ones who regard failure as a cue to quit, rather than an opportunity to reset. There's a notion that consistency means never missing a beat, never faltering, never feeling off. But the truth is, consistency is about how you return. It's about your capacity to reset quickly, shake off the humiliation, arrest the downward spiral, and say, that wasn't ideal, but I'm back now. And then acting on it. Re-engaging without trying to be flawless first. Because shame is the fundamental enemy of momentum. It tells you that one missing day makes you a failure. It murmurs that you didn't finish the assignment, so why bother trying again? Shame wants to make one blunder into a permanent story, but consistency isn't about shame. It's about rhythm. It's about understanding what to do when the pattern breaks. It's about guiding yourself back into the rhythm, not punishing yourself for falling out of it. The quicker you return, the less power the interruption holds. The faster you recommit, the more resilient your identity becomes. Now, you're not simply someone who shows up, you're someone who returns. And that return strengthens you. It builds muscle, it builds grit, it fosters faith, not just in the method, but in oneself. Most people wait until they feel they've earned the right to start afresh. They wait for motivation, for some signal that says, it's okay to come back. But that's not how it works. You don't wait for permission. You return because it's who you are. You don't need to feel perfect. You don't need to fix everything first. You just need to act like someone who shows up even after they fell. That return restores your momentum. It reminds your mind that failure isn't final and that missing a beat isn't who you are. Inconsistency doesn't imply inability. The more you normalize that cycle, the more you convert returning into a habit, and the greater your development gets. This kind of consistency marries grace and roughness. Grace allows you to be human, grit keeps you moving forward despite. Grace means not punishing yourself for every misstep, grit ensures the standard stays within grasp. Grace allows you to forgive yourself for stumbling, grit encourages you to soar faster. When grace and grit function in tandem, you cease bouncing between extremes, from all into checked out. Instead, you start living with rhythm. Rhythm is more crucial than intensity. Most people start with tremendous intensity, then burn out when they can't keep it. But those who attain long-term success master rhythm. They understand their tempo. They know when to push forward and when to ease off without quitting. One lousy day doesn't ruin the whole week, and one terrible week doesn't define the future. They answer with rhythm. You establish rhythm by tracking the proper things. Not just how many wins you rack up, but how often you return, how quickly you reset, how little you negotiate with shame, and how often you act even when you don't feel like it. These are the genuine signs of consistency, those invisible successes that bear more weight than any visible accomplishment. So, if you're in a dip, return. If you've lost momentum, return. If you've messed up, tidy it up and return. Not someday, not next week, today. Even if your return is little, quiet, or unseen, you return for yourself. You return because momentum is yours to rebuild. You return because consistent people aren't perfect, they are persistent. Persistent people don't wait for a feeling of worthiness. They act because they know who they are. Consistent action, over time, accumulates into lasting impact, an impact that changes not just your life but the lives of people around you. The truth is, consistency doesn't only create results, it establishes reputation. And your reputation isn't only shaped by what people say about you, it's how they feel when they hear your name. Do they think of someone dependable, someone they can rely on? Do they perceive someone who finishes what they start, or someone who burns bright but goes away? Consistency develops trust. Trust with your team, your family, your audience, and most importantly, with yourself. And when people trust you, you create room to lead. Not because you're loud, but because your presence emanates conviction. Your energy says, I don't quit when it gets hard. It's not about how showy you are. It's about how reliable you are. It's about being someone others can rely on. A person who doesn't make rash decisions in every storm. Someone who knows how to show up even when it's tough. It's about moving with a special kind of confidence. Not because you have everything figured out, but because you trust the rhythm you've formed. Over time, that rhythm gains weight. Your words start to carry more influence, your vision attracts greater alignment, and your habits create results that seem like momentum. But truly, they are the fruits of the seeds you've planted and nourished when no one was watching. This is where leadership is forged, not in moments of celebrity, but in months of tenacity, in choices that go unrecognized, in opting to keep going even when it feels like no one's paying attention. Eventually, the world will take note, but by then, you're not constructing for them. You're building from a position of strength, depth, and stability. People follow consistency because it's rare. They respect it because it's authentic. They rely on it because it provides protection in a world full of uncertainty. If you want to establish something meaningful, whether it's a brand, a goal, a team, or a family, you must become someone whose energy signals, "You can count on me." I don't flinch when things become rough. I don't disintegrate when plans fail. I adapt, but I never disappear. That identity can't be manufactured, it's earned. It's built in moments when most people give up, in times when momentum freezes, when everything feels stagnant, when no one's cheering, when doubt whispers, when fear nudges, and when quitting feels like the simple decision. That's where constancy is built. Not when everything is going great, but when nothing is. The reward is bigger than the outcomes. It's about who you become. You become someone who doesn't require the optimal settings to keep progressing, someone who doesn't rely on ideal circumstances to keep building. You grasp that the journey itself is the reward, that the result is only the outward manifestation of invisible consistency. You don't just become a consistent person, you become a person of presence, power, and pace. You bring confidence into uncertain spaces. You don't get rattled by resistance. You lead not with noise, but with rhythm. And that kind of presence is magnetic. It draws others in and gives them permission to be steady as well. So, the work you're doing isn't simply for you. Your consistency provides an anchor for people around you. Your acts create space for their conviction. Your momentum helps others uncover theirs, because consistency isn't about being selfish, it's about being generous. It's leadership. And that's the legacy you create. Not only in results, but in rhythm, a cadence others can follow long after you're gone. Now that the foundation is established, the question isn't whether consistency works, the question is if you're ready to live it. Not just once, not just for a week, but as a lifestyle, a personal norm, an unsaid rule. Consistency isn't simply a means to an end, it's the complete structure. It's how things are built, and it's how they persist. You've noticed by now that regular action isn't fueled by hype. It's not dependent on flawless settings or praise. It's a decision taken in solitude, a rhythm selected in quiet times, a consistent yes that becomes part of who you are. When this identity is authentic, when you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start moving from who you've decided to be, everything alters. You stop being governed by emotion. You quit riding the roller coaster of inspiration and exhaustion. You stop beginning again, over and again, because you've developed something that can weather your toughest days. That type of existence, that kind of organization, isn't just productive, it's serene. Because now your energy is grounded, your path is stable. Your habits work for you instead of producing tension. Now the obligation is yours. It's on you to return when the rhythm falters, to anchor yourself to your ideals instead of transient feelings, to keep moving instead of waiting, to keep creating even when no one notices. It's not about who sees it. It's about who you're becoming while you produce it. And you already know that the person who continues in motion long enough becomes unrecognizable to the person who simply started with intensity. Don't wait for motivation to strike. Don't wait for everything to align. Don't wait until you feel good enough to start again. Start now. Reset now. Recommit now. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. The life you want won't be developed by work alone. It will be constructed by effort that's repeated. That's the power of consistent action. It defines your days, builds your future, and rewires your identity. If you remain with it, quietly, persistently, faithfully, you'll look back one day, not only astounded at what you've accomplished, but proud of who you became along the way.